Yeah, we would have. All right. So, thanks very much there, Ben, for the keen eye. So yeah, do you want to go? Do you want to go there? Go from there with a time reference, Ben?
Yeah, I just thought it was worth pointing out that last year, 2013, he was voted by Time magazine as one of the top 100 most influential men in the world. So, he wasn't just a figure known here in Brazil, but clearly had made an impression on the outside as well. And I think really we were talking about him as a kind of pillar of integrity, seen as many people that way anyway. And specifically that point that he rallied round and really masterminded that Mensalão trial, despite the fact that he was tapped by President Lula, and of course the Mensalão scandal was completely around Lula's head, even though he wasn't implicated, and to this day denies any knowledge of it.
Bruce, have you got anything else to add for this topic?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to say, obviously, he has his critics, and they aren't just members of the PT. There are some people who claim that he overstepped there are some people who say that he overstepped his judicial boundaries, that in some senses he not necessarily broke the law, but he certainly stretched it in some instances and rather overstepped his authority. And there had been some criticism of that. And also it's worth pointing out that the real interest now is what he does next. Will he go into politics? Everybody's keen to know whether he'll endorse any of the opposition presidential candidates, whether he chooses Aécio Neves or Eduardo Campos. It seems highly unlikely he's going to back Dilma, given his history now with the PT. But there's no chance of him standing for office himself this October, because he resigned too late for that. But people are very interested to know if he will stand again. As Ben pointed out earlier, an opinion poll published in February, I think, showed that were he to run in this year's election, he would get about 14% of the vote. Now, if he's able to persuade those 14% of people who would have voted for him to vote for one of the opposition candidates, that could present a serious challenge to President Dilma's chances of re-election.
And and you said we're not quite sure of his next steps. We are sure of his exact next steps, because he said on the day that he announced his retirement that his next steps were going to be to put his feet up and watch the World Cup.
Oh, well, we have one fan of the World Cup at least. This is not going to go on the programme, but he was involved with some kind of scandal in which he bought an apartment in Miami for $100 or something, or $1,500, I'm pretty sure. Does anyone remember that?
Oh, no, I'm not aware of that.
No, I don't really.
Right, yeah. Okay. Leo, have you got anything else to say as a closer?
No, I think you said it all.
We ended on a nice one there, that he's going to put his feet up and watch the World Cup. That's a nice closer. So we've spoke for about 7 minutes on that subject, which is a nice amount of time, even without editing. So let's move on to our next subject then. So just let me get the script together. Now, Ben, you're going to open on this one, okay?
All right.
And then we're going to open the floor afterwards to Bruce and to Leo about what they. About predictions for the so-called Red June. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so now moving on to our next topic. Brazil's homeless workers movement, the MTST, staged a 15,000-strong peaceful protest in Sao Paulo yesterday, calling for more affordable housing in the city. The group promised a Red June of protest to coincide with the World Cup. Ben, you were there covering the march yesterday. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's important to point out. Yes, it's important to point out that it wasn't just the MTST, but they very much did lead and coordinate it. 15,000 people is their estimate, and I think it's pretty much on the ball. Pretty much. Close to the mark, because the police said there was only 4,000 people, but we were constantly running up and down the protest, trying to take pictures from different vantage points, and it was really clear that it was much bigger than that, and actually fairly evocative of those scenes that we saw last June when we saw mass protests in over 300 cities across the country. Of course, a lot of the ideology is different, and speaking to the head of the MTST, Guilherme Boulos, who came out with that threat of a Red June. Yesterday was the protest this week was a Red Wednesday, they called it, and he said that they weren't against the World Cup, but what they do want is their part in its history pages. He said that they want housing, that they've got 90 sites around São Paulo that they've occupied, members of this homeless workers movement, and he wants those regularized and legalized, and for the government to step in and help build them. Although he was fairly keen to point out that they didn't just want houses given to them, they do want to help in some way to pay for them, because it gives a kind of a slice of dignity to the people. But it was, as you said, it was a peaceful protest, and it wasn't just the MTST. It was coordinated with other groups, the Não Vai Ter Copa crew that we've seen, who themselves have not managed to draw particularly big crowds. The last kind of pure anti-World Cup protest that they organised drew, I think it was 500 or 600 people, but they've seen that now when they bring all of these groups together, including the MPL, the Free Fare movement, which of course played a big hand in stirring up those mass protests last year, that they can start bringing those numbers together. There are 15,000, 20,000 at a similar protest last week. So I think they are the ones to watch. And an interesting point to mention is that Guilherme Boulos told me that if the government didn't start giving some kind of that he met with the president, but he said that if the government didn't start playing ball, then there is absolutely no question that they are going to have there's going to be a red opening to the World Cup on the 12th of June. They're promising a lot of disruption. They've proved very, very convincingly that they can cause disruption, both by shutting roads and invading buildings and all sorts of things. And they said if that doesn't work, they could radicalize their actions as current tactics were not having the right effect. But you're right, they were peaceful, and the number of police there was very small. If you look at the other protests, the kind of pure anti-World Cup protest, and the police very regularly outnumber the protesters. But the police, the reinforcements at this week's protest was very subtle.
Mm-hmm. Well, the MTST, they have a long history, a long tradition of peaceful and also extremely organised protests. Now, do you believe in this concept of the Red June, or do you think that some kind of deal is going to be struck? I mean, we know that the MTST does have some quite close links with the ruling Workers' Party. Do you think? What's your opinion on that?
I believe they're gonna do some kind of arrangement, and I do believe also that would be not the best thing. I think this kind of protest should use the World Cup, should use the event. I don't know if I agree with people who say that the World Cup is not the time to do this or the time to do that. But when you face the problems Brazil have with the problems that the MTST needs to protest about things, they are organized. They are well organized, as you said, because there is a really great problem, historic problem, and how not only in affordable housing, but in all the territory of Brazil. How do you? I'm at a loss for words right now, because this is a high problem issue for me, because I hear things about this all my life, and I'm 41 years old. So I don't know. I think it's one of the pressing problems in Brazil.
And what's that? Affordable housing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Not only affordable housing, but reforma agrária.
Agrarian reform.
Agrarian reform.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pressing issue, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's and the fact that it is a time of a world event. That I mean, so be it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You think this is a just cause to protest for? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Much more so that if there was going to be a cause, this is the cause that you think is the most pressing, perhaps.
I think this is one of the most pressing problems in Brazil. I think that is more pressing than violence, actually.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Bruce, what have you got to say about the MTST and the Red June? Do you think it's going to go ahead? Do you think a deal will be struck? What have you got to say about affordable housing in Brazil?
Well, I don't have any insider information on whether a deal is going to be struck. It seems to me they are proving still remarkably successful at dominating the agenda. I mean, the fact they were able to get so many people out right on the eve of the Cup, we've just got a week to go, suggests they really are a powerful political force. Clearly, they have quite a charismatic leader who is able to get these, is able to get a hearing with the president. I think that's something that makes a big difference. I think the trouble is with many of the protests that we've had for the last year or so is that there are all kinds of causes that are bound up in the Não Vai Ter Copa, all kinds of protests against corruption or police violence or in favour of more spending on schools and hospitals. And the trouble is that diffusion of voices means that perhaps none of the causes really gets a proper audience. Whereas arguably, if Guillermo, I forget his name, so it's Guillermo Boulos, is that it?
Guilherme Boulos.
Guilherme Boulos. If Guilherme Boulos is able to somehow make this question of lack of affordable housing a kind of central issue of the protest, then he really may capitalize on this wave of unrest that's been building steadily over the past year. Whether it disrupts the World Cup, I don't know. I was expecting perhaps a slight subsidence in the amount of street activity now we are so close to kickoff, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So it's quite possible they may make their demands during the tournament. But as I say, if the president wanted to pick a cause really to run with, then this might be the one to do it. It has a kind of coherent philosophy behind it, and it has a serious leader, and perhaps we could see some progress.
Okay, that's great. That's great, Bruce. Ben, have you got anything else to say about this?
Yeah, I just think it has such power and momentum behind it, because if you go and talk to the people there, it's very hard to argue with them. I was talking to a number of the people kind of at the front banner of that protest, and they say, look, we're not against the World Cup. We want the World Cup to be a success. And these are people that have directly, in their eyes, lost their homes because of World Cup speculation. If somebody's there standing at the head of a protest saying, I'm here because I've lost my home and I'm destitute, I've got nowhere else to live, and I've been to that camp up 4 kilometers from the stadium, which has some people say 4,000 to 5,000 families there now. Those people are destitute, and they say that they're there because of speculation that's in some cases trebled their rents. And as the other guys have said, it's very difficult to argue with that, and with the leader who does have a way to talk to the president. He has her ear. And I think other protest movements have seen how coordinated and coherent they are, and not wanting to be at all cynical, I think there is an amount of using this MTST success. Because this protest this week we saw 20 movements together, and we know that certain public sector strike unions and Wildcat industrial group strike groups are also going to join in. So I'm sure there are many people in those groups that share the ideology, but I think they have looked at this group with some kind of in awe at their coherence and the way they managed to coordinate these rather massive protests, which I think are the most similar thing that we've seen in recent times to what happened last year.
Ben, could you summarise very quickly for us what the people on the ground during the protest, what they're calling for, what they're asking for, and what their demands are? Could you summarise very quickly for us?
The people that I spoke to were saying that they want cheap housing. They want the government to step in and help them with the construction of that housing, but they do, at the end of the process, want to put money in themselves. They say, destitute and homeless. They see it very much linked to the World Cup. Those 4 neighbourhoods surrounding the Itaquera region where we have the São Paulo World Cup. They say that speculation there, because of the World Cup, has driven up those rents 2 to 3 times in some cases, and it's just not the case that they can live there anymore. But I think the government's got a very big job on its hands. As I say, 90 sites around São Paulo only, and this isn't just a movement that's in São Paulo, it's across the country. A couple of weeks ago we saw coordinated protests across the country. I think it was in 14 states. So even if they do, even if the government does sort of say it's going to turn around and legalize some of these occupied lands, then there are many other people that are going to be knocking at their door afterwards.
Okay, that's great. Leo, have you got anything to finish with on this topic?
No, I think I already ranted about it.
No, it was a good rant. It was a good rant, especially coming from a Brazilian. Bruce, have you got anything to finish with?
No, I think Ben's summary said it very nicely.
Okay, fantastic. We're doing really good for time here, guys, so thanks very much. I appreciate for this. It's a lot less time I have to piss about editing. Okay, so moving on to our next topic. Okay. Now moving on to our final topic for this edition of the Brazil podcast. Earlier this week, President Dilma Rousseff hosted a dinner for a handful of foreign correspondents. With just 1 week to go until the World Cup, With just 1 week to go until the World Cup, the President reportedly remains confident as ever that the event will be a major success. Now guys, I don't know about yourselves, but I couldn't make the dinner. I was snowed under with work.
Yes, for me it was also a burden.
I didn't like
I couldn't reach. I couldn't make it.
Okay. Bruce, what about you?
I heard they were going to be serving peanuts, and as I'm allergic, I decided to skip it.
I don't know if I'll include this in the program, by the way, so just say whatever you like. But Ben?
Yeah,
no, you can do
that. Ben?
Yeah, I didn't like the look of the menu either. No, buy-in prawn stew. Oh, who am I kidding? I love buy-in prawn stew.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? Okay. Now, okay. So now President Rousseff has talked before about how Brazil is going to Now President Rousseff has talked before about how Brazil is going to host the Cup of Cups. Now with 1 week to go, how do you think that's looking? And to Leo first.
Okay, I don't know about being the Cup of Cups. I think we have to regain the love for the game, and I think that's the way it's going to be. I think Brazilians are going to fall in love with the game again, and believe me, they are not so in love with the game anymore. If you look at the numbers of occupation in the games, the Brazilian Championship has a lot less than the MLS, the United States Championship. So that shows you how things are going. And okay, some of that is because the the attendance is low sometimes because you have to pay lots of dough to watch a game, but that's not the only problem. I think we are seeing we are like I said, we are regaining this love for the game. When I watch kids trying to find a lost sticker for the World Cup sticker album, I think I see this love again. And believe me, the streets are full of kids doing this kind of how do you say this, Sam? Troca de figurinhas.
Exchanging stickers.
Oh, okay. The kids are looking to exchange stickers, and this time in Brazil, so people are feeling that love again. And it's funny because all the time you see, streets are not painted as they were before. Oh, people don't love they love the World Cup, and that's what you're going to see.
Just quickly, Leo, why do you think Brazilians fell out of love with the game?
I don't know. I think people started to think that the Confederation, the CBF, was having lots of saying, and Brazil, the last years Brazil was playing in London and here, so that's something too.
Sorry, can you say that again? The last year Brazil was
the last years Brazil was playing more in London than here. And I think that's terrible also. Brazil was trying to be a televised event. So when you had last year, when you saw the Confederations Cup, I saw that Brazilians was starting to feel, this is our seleção again, and that's something that people forgot the feeling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Bruce, Cup of Cups. What do you think?
Well, it's the $64 million question, isn't it? I think that enthusiasm is starting to take hold. I'm seeing more streets painted in green and yellow. I'm seeing more streamers flying across those streets. But there is still a lot of chaos in the cities. There is still a lot of protests. Today in Rio, the sewage workers and the water treatment people went on strike, blocking one of the main tunnels, which caused terrible traffic across the city. In Sao Paulo, obviously the metro workers went on strike, and although again the extent of the strike was limited, it still had a knock-on effect on the traffic in the city, which is already pretty terrible. So I do worry about transport being an issue. I think that Brazilians are getting behind the Brazil team. I don't think it's quite the same anymore, the World Cup, perhaps to sound like a terrible curmudgeon, but I don't think it's quite like, perhaps I'm only 33, so there's a limit to the number of World Cups I've seen, but it strikes me as the great teams of Brazil in the past, from, say, 1970 or from 1982, that was really a moment where Brazil, the team, helped to define the nation. I think Brazil is a mature country now, which has many other strings to its bow, and I think people have other interests other than football, and I don't think that Brazilians necessarily define themselves as much through their football as perhaps they once did. As I say, I'm getting the sense that enthusiasm is building towards the tournament, and I hope it's going to be a huge success. I hope that protests and transport don't disrupt it. But I think there is still a 50-50 chance things could go either way.
Ben Tavler, Cup of Cups, what do you think?
Well, as with everybody else, I hope so as well. I think there's been so much money, blood, sweat, and tears that has gone into it that I really hope that it's a kind of catalyst to bring a new generation of football lovers. And actually, I had the privilege to go to the World Cup Stadium here in São Paulo on Sunday for its second final test. It was actually the first football game I'd ever been to. And as somebody that clearly isn't that much of a football fan, the World Cup is something that I will always turn on and tune into. So I really hope that other people will do that. Whether this country is still one that bleeds football, which seems to be a phrase that gets used a lot at the moment, we'll see. But I'm hopeful that people will rally round the World Cup. I don't think there are going to be that many disruptions to the game itself. I think people watching on TV from outside aren't going to see won't see that much different from a normal World Cup. The only thing, as Bruce said, is that if you can't get the fans there, and today's metro strike in São Paulo, although limited to just 3 lines, if somebody had tried to get to the World Cup stadium today, they wouldn't have been able to do it by metro. They'd have had to go around the houses to do it. So let's see. I'm hopeful it will be good, and I think that people have paid enough, and in not just money, but also in all the disruption and criticism, and of course Brazil's image has taken a bit of a knock in the run-up to the World Cup. So I hope all of it hasn't been in vain, and that Brazil manages to regain some of that image and some of that credibility in the next month.
Okay. So we've talked about the challenges. Hello,
Ben. I'm sorry, Ben. What should you say about you have gone to the Arena Corinthians? So
yeah.
What do you saw there? It was problematic. You see much unfinished business there.
Well, the thing was, most of it was good. I hadn't been to the test before. I spoke to other journalists who had, and they said, "Wow, what a difference Sorry, I spoke to other journalists who'd been to the previous final test there, and they said, "Wow, what a difference in 2 weeks." They'd managed to finish a lot. There was a lot less scaffolding around. There weren't leaks everywhere. The main problem was that they still hadn't been able to get enough people into that stadium and get the right certificates in place to get both of those temporary stands open. The reason they called the second final test at that stadium was that the first one didn't have the temporary stadiums open at all, and this one, they opened one of them but only half filled it, and the second one of these temporary stands, which each boost the capacity of the stadium by 10,000, that wasn't open at all. And we spoke to officials there, we spoke to FIFA, we spoke to Corinthians, and they all kind of shrugged and said it's going to be fine, but the fact remains that that place won't get a full capacity kind of traditional fans jumping up and down on the stands test until that opening match on Thursday. And we spoke to some of the fans coming off those temporary stands afterwards, and they all said, "Oh, we were a little bit nervous. We didn't quite jump around as much as we would have done normally because it was just a little bit wobbly." But I think that's normal for temporary stands. But in terms of kind of coordination, there were lots of volunteers there. There were lots of stewards. There'll be, I think it's 1,300 stewards and 1,200 volunteers for that opening game, a number of them speaking English. So let's see. I think it's going to be a success, at least on the pitch and inside the stadium. Whether people have problems getting there on transport, that's a different matter.
Okay, yeah, I do agree with that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I do agree with that. Transportation will be a problem, and I think it was a lost opportunity, and we have to face this issue and think about that for the 2016 Olympics, because it will be more of a mess. Transportation in Rio is almost as bad as it is in São Paulo. So we have to look at this with the right mindset.
Okay. So guys,
Oh, another thing, Sam.
Go for it.
I don't know if you think it's you have to you can add this, but it's interesting that Dilma invited bloggers one week, sports journalists the other week, and then foreign press.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. She was doing one event like that per week, and of course this creates a kind of a perverse tactic. I think she's trying to get a kind of a she's trying to make some minds change.
Mm-hmm.
Some critics change positions, and at the same time, it's a bit strange that she's always the kind of feedback that I got for that is that she's always surprised by something, which tells me that some of her advisors are not that good. Some ministers are not that good.
That wouldn't be a surprise to me at all. Well, I mean, it's all PR at the end of the day. So just for the next part, guys, we'll try and summarize this quickly. So, okay, so we've talked about the challenges to the World Cup at length. In fact, everybody has. But I ask you if you could summarize briefly what these challenges for the World Cup will be. I'll just say that again. So we've talked about the challenges to the World Cup at length. In fact, almost everybody has. Sorry, there's some background noise. We've talked about the challenges at length. We've talked about the challenges to the World Cup at length. In fact, almost everybody has. But can I ask you now to summarise very briefly what you think these challenges will be? And that's going to go to Leo. That's going to go to you first. So just one or two things that you're going to be just in list form, bullet points. What you think the main challenges are going to be?
Okay, I think transportation will be the main issue, and of course we're gonna have this. I don't know if there will be that much trouble with the airports. I think it will be okay. It will be a burden for if you're trying to reach Cuiabá, you're gonna have to wait some time. If you're going to Porto Alegre, you're gonna wait some time. But I think if you traveled around the United States, you had the same kind of thing, and it's so easy to forget about this kind of thing when you are in a country that airports maybe not that ready. But then again, I think ground transportation will be worse, and I fear that.
That makes sense. Bruce, sorry.
Yeah, I think transport will be one of the main issues. I think there'll be other issues that some tourists find difficult. In particular, language is perhaps something not everyone has accounted for. Very few people do speak English, and I think communication could be an issue in some cities.
Okay, Ben.
Yeah, language was going to be the point I came up. Yes, language was going to be the point that I brought up as well. People coming here, I think, would be well advised to learn at least 20 words of Portuguese, and most of those food, because food is one of those areas of language where nearly everything's different. And if somebody's going to be sitting down looking for the chicken and not knowing the word frango, then they might have a problem. But in all seriousness, yeah, language, transportation, and if we do see some of these protests popping up, they could pose problems. I'm sure we'll see a number of cases of journalists carrying cameras being mugged, but perhaps people can follow the advice issued by the police here in São Paulo in that famous brochure that was issued a couple of weeks ago, where they said, "Please don't react, scream, or argue with your assailant."
Sorry, Ben, I've got to interrupt you there. You said I think you meant tourists. You said journalists instead of tourists.
No, I did mean journalist.
You did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I jumped over what I wanted to say, and I think tourists are going to have to be. And I do think we're going to see a few cases of both tourists and journalists perhaps getting mugged in some places, although I think it's been perhaps overdone, that story on violence and crime, as Leo said earlier. But perhaps people would like to heed the advice of the police, and they issued a brochure recently saying, don't argue, scream or react if you are mugged. So I think that's basically it. But I just hope everybody has a really good World Cup.
Okay, so now moving away from the challenges, what are going to be the real highlights of the 2000 World? And moving away from the challenges, what are going to be the real highlights of the 2014 World Cup in Brazil? Why do you think it's going to be so special? And that question, Leo, could you answer that for me as a Brazilian?
I think it will be special if you. For me, the special thing it will be to look at Brazil, at the whole diversity of Brazil. People that always think about Brazil in terms of Rio or just about the rainforest or things like that will see how big this country is and how amazing how impressive it is to see that Brazil in the south is one thing, in the north is another, completely different, and it is a great country, to visit. I don't mean that there won't be problems. I don't mean that there won't be violence, but I think this will be the great thing.
Okay, and Bruce, why do you think it's going to be such a special World Cup?
Well, I think the future of international football and World Cups as we know it is at stake. I think there's been so much around this World Cup about whether it's a good use of public money to fund this kind of an event. At the same time, we have these reports that Qatar bought the 2022 World Cup, and there are suspicions as to how much fun you're going to have in Russia in 2018. I think that really, unless this tournament is a big success, we could start to see the World Cup perhaps losing some of its luster. So I think there's a lot riding on this tournament, and I think if it is a success, then perhaps we'll still be talking about World Cups in another 50 years' time. If not, perhaps we'll start to see it being phased out and being overtaken by other global competitions which might excite the public more and perhaps might cost a little less as well.
And what about Brazil? Have you got any? Has anyone got any special? Ben, I'm going to send this to you next. Why is it going to be such a special World Cup?
I think it's the first chance that a lot of people have had to visit Brazil. It's a country that has kind of got closer to Europe in the last decade. People who would traditionally go on holiday to the Mediterranean perhaps now can afford to come over to South America and see Brazil. I think it's a great opportunity to showcase what Brazil has to offer, as Leo was saying, from the cowboys in the south to the Potiguares up in Natal and everybody in between. And I think that just that whole cultural spectrum across the country is going to be a fantastic opportunity for people, and food across the country. I think the way to a man's heart, people often say, is through his stomach. And if we've got all these predominantly men coming over to see the World Cup, they're going to see Brazilian cuisine for the first time. I think that could even be one of the saving graces of their trip to Brazil. The food here is, of course, fantastic. But also, as Leo touched on earlier, this is probably a chance for a new generation to fall in love with football in Brazil, and I think that's something that could be really special.
And what about the famed Brazilian party spirit? Has anyone got anything to say about that?
I think the protests took some of that. It will be wonderful if we do some kind of carnival-like party, but I'm waiting to see what's going to happen.
Bruce?
Yeah, I'm sure that it will be. I'm sure that visitors here will have a good time in terms of the atmosphere, in terms of the music, in terms of just the social life, in terms of sorry, let me just rephrase that.
Yeah,
I'm sure the visitors here will have a great time. I'm sure that there will be. I'm sure that it will be a fun event, and that there will be. It's hard not to visit Brazil and fall in love with at least some of it. You know, Rio. Sorry, I'm just rather tired and losing my thread here. Let me try one more time.
No, go for it, please. Don't worry.
I think it's very hard to come to Brazil and not be enchanted in some way or other. I think that despite all the problems that we've talked about, despite many of the practical issues that may affect people's day-to-day activities, the fact remains Brazil is a beautiful country and a highly seductive one. And I think to come to Brazil for a World Cup, a football World Cup, a sport at which Brazil leads the world, I think it will take quite some effort not to have a good time.
Okay, Ben, have you got anything final to say there?
I did, I just forgot. What was I going to say? Oh my god. What was the question? Oh, yes. I think everybody coming to Brazil, because they've seen coverage in the news of all the problems and everything leading up to the World Cup, people are coming here already on a bit of a downer. But I think once they're here, they're going to see that Brazil is such a special country, and they're going to come here with that sense of adventure which you really need in Brazil. You don't come to Brazil expecting everything to happen at the drop of a hat. You expect things to happen in the jeitinho brasileiro, you know, in the way that things happen. If you could stamp 2 words on Brazil, and all these preparations, it's eventually and probably, and that's the way you have to look at things here. Don't come here looking for everything to go off without a hitch. Come here expecting things to happen eventually, and you're going to have a great time.
Leo, as a Brazilian, have you got anything else to say on behalf of Brazilians?
Oh, I don't know if it's on behalf, but I think it's a good piece of advice. I mean, you have to be aware of things. So most of the time, if you follow some basic rules, you will be okay. As Ben was saying before, you can show cameras around. You can show your cell phone around, your mobile. I think you have to be aware of that. And the other
Come
thing
on, man. Give me something on behalf of Brazilians. Tell me something on behalf of Brazilians.
I would do just that.
Okay.
You can have the cruelty aspects of Brazil, the thing that but you have to face the complexity as it is. You have to understand that the same person that would be so open with you may be cruel to you if you're on her wrong foot or something like that. But you have to enjoy the fact that you are going to an adventure, as Ben said, and you have to do. The thing I would say is, if you are in Belo Horizonte, try to taste the good food there. If you're going to visit us in Rio, enjoy your caipirinhas, your juices. There is amazing fruit here, things like that. But at the same time, be aware of your surroundings.
Mm-hmm. And Leo, sorry, just lastly to summarise quickly, we've talked a lot today about the impact of the World Cup and about what foreigners should expect and people coming here. What about Brazilians and what impact the World Cup's going to have on Brazilians?
Oh, I hope they enjoy it also. I think we are going to people were waiting in the line, in FIFA line at the web. They were trying to fight for a ticket. They are starting to understand that it will be a great event, and I hope they use this time to receive people well, to understand the world. Sometimes Brazil is so closed from within. We look too much for our own problems, and we don't understand that we belong to the world.
Okay, fantastic. Right, is everybody happy? I think that's just about time to wrap it up.
Yeah, seems good.
That's great. I've got to run actually, Sam, if that's all right.
Yeah. You can leave right now, mate. No worries. It's just me on the last bit. So yeah, feel free.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers, Bruce. Take it easy, mate.
Bye.
Great, Bruce.
Okay, so that's it for this week. Thanks very much to our guests, Bruce Douglas, Ben Taverner, and Leo Macario. You've been listening to the Brazil podcast. I leave you this week. You've been listening to the Brazil podcast. This week I leave you with Bachinho singing Não Nasci para Jogador. We all good?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. I pronounced everything okay?
Said it beautifully.
Oh. Okay. Guys, thanks very much. Ben, cheers. It's been great. Great talking to you again. I'll be in Sao Paulo next week. Let's try and grab lunch or something. Leo, pleasure as always. One day I'd really like to meet you in person as well.
Maybe me too.
Maybe if I get a day off during the World Cup, maybe we can catch a match together.
Okay. Great talking to you.
As always, take it easy, guys. Cheers. Good night.
Cheers.
Ciao.